Hello, Tadeo.
Nania.
We have lots of wonderful questions from our viewers.
All right, please proceed.
Okay, this first question is from a person who is saying, I am currently 10 weeks pregnant, and I'm wondering if my Oversoul picks my baby's Oversoul. And also, how and when are the chakras formed during pregnancy?
There is an agreement made on several different levels, not only within the Oversoul, but also within the individual soul and the higher mind, about what kind of themes will be explored by the personalities being formed for the physical experience. In pregnancy, as the various organs develop to a point of about 90 to 95%, then the chakra system will activate in those particular areas represented by those almost complete organs, but there will always be left a little bit of leeway, a little bit of flexibility for changes to occur in the energy system of the body until final adjustments are made and the organs have completely formed. But as each organ forms, the chakra in that area will generally start activating about 90 to 95% of the formation.
Okay, thank you. Some teachers talk about individual souls and oversouls, but then others, like Abraham, talk about the idea of streams of consciousness, or this idea of a general oneness of life energy that flows through different experiences. Is this something like the particle wave theory duality, where both are true and contained within the same phenomena? And can you help us understand how this works together?
Yes, it is similar to the wave-particle duality, but you're also describing a couple of different things in a couple of different ways. In other words, the idea of individuated souls and oversouls and so on and so forth is a representation of a certain frequency of consciousness within all that is, within the one, that expresses itself apparently as a separate, self-aware consciousness on a certain level. The idea of streams of consciousness is more a description of how different levels of consciousness may access information or communicate with one another. It is not necessarily the same thing as the individuated levels of consciousness to say stream of consciousness. That's more a methodology than it is a definition of a particular level of consciousness.
Okay. When humans pray, are they actually praying to God or to oversouls?
What difference does it make? Since Oversoul is a part of all that is, it depends upon their intention, their focus. But again, remember, prayer is simply a matter of being totally present in gratitude for what is. It's not about what you wish for. It's about being in absolute appreciation for what is, so that more can happen that needs to come in that is relevant for that particular personality. So it will often, a prayer, so to speak, a state of being, a state of present prayer in gratitude and appreciation, simply go to where it needs to go depending upon what level of consciousness, all that is, the oversoul, the individual soul, higher mind, what have you, is most capable and most relevant for helping the individual access the information and experiences that they require. So it will go where it needs to go, automatically.
Okay. And what is the need for all souls to go through oversouls?
It's not a need, it's simply a description of the general structure of creating levels within all that is to have different kinds of experiences. So you're sort of looking at it in a sort of linear, old-fashioned way. The Oversoul is simply a representation of a certain level of all that is that has a specific reason for existing in the way that it does. It's not that there is a need to go through it. It's simply the way things are structured when you're coming from a linear perspective. It's the way they appear to you.
Okay, and are there dense physical reality structures that are not used by oversouls? How did the oversouls conclude that they needed the concept of density to experience something new? Are there oversouls who do not wish to accumulate new experiences like the oversouls?
There are some densities that some oversouls may not require in a linear sense for certain experiences. Although, again, remember, everything exists simultaneously. So once again, the way the question is being asked is a little bit outdated, a little bit linear, a little bit old-fashioned, because you're imposing certain kinds of personality decisions on something that doesn't have a personality. It only has an identity. It only has a sense of its own existence. So the idea is it's not so much that they're making these decisions to experience this or that, although from your linear perspective it would appear so. Again, what you're experiencing is simply a description of the structure as it exists within the totality of existence. And different oversouls, based on the themes of the oversouls, the reason that that oversoul is differentiated from any other oversoul, will simply automatically determine what realities and densities they connect to as part of who they are, what they are, as the theme they represent. It's simply an automatic thing. It doesn't require a decision from that level. It simply happens because that's the definition of that oversoul, to be connected to certain densities. Otherwise, it would be a different oversoul.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
In regard to oversouls, do they choose our themes for us, or does each branch of the oversoul choose its own theme? For instance, sometimes I feel like I am messing up my role as a parent and my children suffer for my parenting mistakes. Is that possible, or did my children choose me knowing that experiences I would be providing for them as their parent, and therefore, no matter what I do, it is right? Can you change themes here on Earth once they're chosen, and how?
Just because parents and children choose each other doesn't mean you can't make mistakes. But there was an understanding that misunderstandings might occur, mistakes might occur, challenges would crop up that are important to face together, and each of you provide reflections for each other. It doesn't mean that everything you do, quote unquote, is right. It can be out of alignment. Therefore, the choice that was made to be together is for the purpose of getting the reflections from one another to self-correct, to course correct, to go back into alignment. So you can make mistakes, so to speak, but the mistake doesn't come out as the effect of a mistake if you learn from it, if you understand it's there for a reason to put you in touch with things that can help you go back into alignment, and use the relationships you have with parents and children to reflect to one another what you need to know to become more of yourselves, and are willing to explore those things in that way. So the idea is to know that agreements were made, generalizations were allowed, explorations were allowed, mistakes were allowed, because everyone knows that you may not necessarily get everything correctly and understood in exactly the experiences you are having right away, but you are given free rein and free will to course correct, to explore, to investigate, to determine what for you is in or out of alignment, and use friends and family and other souls to get the reflections you need and to share the reflections you can give to help each other come into alignment and to make positive and constructive choices in your lives.
Okay, and can or do our oversouls take on other forms of life, such as a plant, insect, or other organism with a consciousness? If so, can we connect with them? And is there any difference to the process of seeking that connection?
Again, it's not that the oversoul takes on those forms. Those forms are part of an oversoul. They're extensions of an oversoul. Maybe even the same oversoul you are an extension of. So it's not like they take it on. That's a very linear way of putting it, as if they're coming from somewhere and becoming something else. Oversoul, by definition, contains many different expressions of individuated souls and personalities. So the idea is that for any given oversoul, it may already contain any number of extensions in either the human, the animal, the plant, the mineral, or what have you, or spirit areas. So it's simply that those are representations of oversouls. The idea of communicating with it, or any particular extension of it, is the same as with anything. You start identifying with it, you start interacting with it in whatever way your imagination so desires. You use whatever tools and techniques to go into altered states that you can, that are appropriate and in alignment with who you are. And give yourself the opportunity to expand your minds and expand your consciousness in a way that may bring to you inspirations for how to connect to these things, how to communicate to different aspects of an oversoul that may be presenting itself in different forms. At the same time, it's presenting itself as you.
Okay, and are there branches to our oversoul? For example, is there a branch that has multiple direct connections to Earth, manifested as different consciousnesses, and another branch in another galaxy or a different dimension? Or do they all stem out directly from one oversoul and are equally connected?
Again, it depends on what level you're talking about. Yes, oversouls can branch out into many different places, other galaxies, other dimensions, so on and so forth. But remember that are oversouls of oversouls too. So it depends on what level of oversoul you're talking about as to how many branches you could say are directly connected to a single oversoul, or perhaps, if you wish, how many branches are germane for a sub-oversoul or a different sub-oversoul that may have a definitive theme that doesn't require all of the branches that a larger, higher oversoul may also extend from itself. So it just depends on what level of oversoul you're talking from, but the overall collective answer to all of that is yes.
Okay. Do oversouls specialize in different types of experiences? For example, are there oversouls for animals and other plants, crystals, higher dimensional beings, and other galaxies, or oversouls for angels?
Yes. Because again, it depends on the definition of a particular oversoul or sub-oversoul or whatever you want to call it that has its particular theme of existence, and therefore that theme will determine what the oversoul extends itself as. So yes, you can have groups of animal oversouls, you can have groups of plant oversouls, you can have oversouls that contain both plants, animals, and humans. You have to understand in this holographic structure, it can be anything and everything, basically, that you can imagine can exist as a differentiation of a different kind of oversoul. Anything you can imagine in that sense, as far as the oversouls are concerned, most likely will exist as its own thematic oversoul, no matter how you wish to frame it. So there are oversouls that contain only one kind of experience. There are oversouls that contain an infinite kind or number of experiences, and everything in between, because it's holographically structured, and everything exists within all that is, and any variation of all that is, as an oversoul, a sub-oversoul, a soul, a higher mind, a physical person, can exist in a variety of different forms. So again, the overall collective answer is yes.
Okay, and what is the best permission slip or technique to heal a soul fragmentation? What can you tell us about soul fragmentation?
It depends on what you mean by soul fragmentation, because from our perspective, there's no such thing. A soul is a soul. You may feel fragmented as a physical personality and assume that the fragmentation is happening in your soul, if that's what you mean by fragmentation. But from our perspective, in a sense, the way to deal with soul fragmentation is to understand that it doesn't really exist in the way that we understand you may be expressing it.
Okay. What technique or permission slip can we use to be able to see the energy, like auras and all the energy around us? Is it a belief we hold that we cannot see it, or does it have to do with frequency?
Well, again, what's the difference between those things? Because every belief you have is a particular frequency. And if you have a belief that it's not something you can see or need to see right now, which can be the case, then of course that belief is operating on a certain frequency That doesn't necessarily allow you as a physical human to perceive auras. But that doesn't mean something's wrong just because you can't see them. Again, it's a matter of whether you need to see them, whether it's relevant for you to see them. But again, in the most general answer, by, again, following the formula, acting on your passion, anything that is relevant for you to start experiencing in your life will happen in perfect timing. So again, that might be the easiest way. Just follow your passion, live your life, and let the things come in. Let the experiences happen automatically and unfold automatically that are relevant for you to experience as you keep ascending, as you keep raising your vibration. These kinds of things may become natural for most people because you're extending your senses and making them capable of extending into more rarefied dimensions, more rarefied frequencies, at which point you may start perceiving things you couldn't perceive before. But again, it depends upon its relevancy for you in this particular thematic life. Some people will see auras. Some people don't need to.
In a book I read about past life regression, it explained that if a personality or spirit, not the oversoul or soul, needed to have a certain experience in life mastered, the spirit must come back to physical reality with no choice in the matter. Is this true? And does the Oversoul choose all our experiences, or are there ones that we must complete?
Again, it's not that the Oversoul chooses the experience in the classical sense that you mean that. There is relevance to certain things happening within a certain definition of an Oversoul. And that means that the souls in that Oversoul are relevant to that Oversoul, and that the higher minds relevant to those souls also have certain things that are relevant to the definition of those souls and Oversouls. And the personalities will have certain themes that are relevant to that particular Oversoul's theme. So it's not that the Oversoul chooses it, it's just an extension of what the Oversoul is that extends into what the soul is and what the higher mind is for that particular personality and what that personality is because of what the Oversoul is as its ultimate definition, as its primal core definition. So the idea is that if you have decided on some level to experience certain themes, certain experiences, then you may, if you don't experience it in one sense, in one incarnation, you may create the experience of a continuing incarnation to finish out something that you agreed to explore, that you chose to explore from perhaps a spirit level. But I don't wish to confuse you by using the word choice there. Yes, there are choices, but also the choices that you have available to you are relevant to the theme that you are connected to, the reason you are who you are, what you are. The unique reflection that you are has certain themes built into it. That's what makes it a unique reflection. And therefore, the free will choices that you have as a personality and the choices you make for what to experience and when are all going to be based primarily on those themes. There's still a wide range of choice, but they will all be within a certain thematic representation that stretches all the way up to all that is, you being a unique reflection of it, experiencing these particular things in the particular way that you do. It's not that you're forced to come back. You don't necessarily have to. And remember that reincarnation is an illusion. All things exist simultaneously. But you may make the choice to say, well, I didn't feel like I finished that particular theme, therefore I will now create another experience that from the linear reality will be perceived as a reincarnation in order to continue to finish that theme, to wrap it up, because I made an agreement with myself to do so. And therefore you may make that choice. But ultimately speaking, no, you don't have to, at least not right away. You can choose to explore the same theme, other levels, other dimensions, other ways, other civilizations. You may ultimately come back to it, but in some way, shape, or form, whatever agreements you make are representative of the theme that you are, and you will complete those themes, but you still have a wide range of availability and free will as to exactly how to complete those themes. It doesn't have to be forced upon you to complete it within an incarnational context, unless there's something about that particular theme that can only be completed in a physical experience. But again, that's something that you will actually wish to do because you will wish to fulfill the agreement that you made to complete that theme in order to grow in a particular way.
Okay, and what is our Oversoul learning from our broadcast together here today? How different is the experience for the Oversoul when seeing recordings of events instead of seeing them live?
What makes you think the Oversoul can't see them live whenever it wants to? It's not bound by time and space. To it, the idea of a recording and the idea of a live experience are one and the same, and may overlap for it. So it will see the nuances in what may appear to be the differences between a live interaction and a recorded interaction, as they appear different to you as a personality. But from the Oversoul's perspective, those are very subtle nuances. It will pick up on whatever it needs to add to itself if there is something relevant for it in those nuances, in those differences. But as far as the Oversoul is concerned, being not bound by time and space in the same way the personality is, it simply absorbs the information directly that it needs to. It doesn't really focus on how it's coming to it. It simply gravitates and accepts whatever comes to it that is relevant.
And do Oversouls have Oversouls? If so, how many levels of Oversouls are there up to the one supreme Oversoul? Can you give specific frequency, CPS?
No, because there are too many. There can be any number, there can be an infinite number, and there can even be Oversouls of the one. It never ends. So it just depends upon the differentiations that are relevant for someone to perceive. Any number of Oversouls exist above and beyond other Oversouls if it is relevant for someone to be aware of what the uniqueness of that particular Oversoul presentation is. Therefore, the idea of giving you frequencies would simply go on and on and on and on and on and on and on forever. Because the idea is that any difference at all, the slightest difference from one frequency to another can be a completely different Oversoul. So simply assume that the frequencies are infinite and that your dial has the infinite ability to touch into whatever frequency of whatever Oversoul is germane and relevant for you from this particular position from which you are asking the question. And even, again, as you say, all the way up to the Supreme, there are, again, continuations and diversifications of what it means to be the one, to be the Supreme. There are Oversouls of Supremes, and on and on and on and on and on.
An infinite universe, for sure.
Infinite multiverse.
And this person is asking, since you have the ability to travel through different timelines and see them, do you have the ability to talk directly to the Oversoul, or can you let us speak through the channel to the Oversoul?
It can be done within certain parameters, again, when relevant, which it is not today.
Okay. And this person is wondering, how do I remain true to the will and timeline of the Oversoul when my inner vibrations are repeatedly being inundated with bullying energies of either an individual or of human collective origin? That seemingly want to pressure me into going into lower vibrational states. Attempting to force a change in timeline through the perceptions of my conscious mind. So how does a person stay true to themselves and their Oversoul timeline while being frequently pressured, energetically challenged to go to a lower vibrational state?
Well, again, this just goes back to what we have discussed on a very simple level. Why do you accept the pressure? Why do you accept the bullying? Why do you recreate your version of it in your reality as if it was relevant for you? What are you getting out of doing so? This, again, simply requires deep, honest self-investigation into your motivational mechanisms, why those things would seem real to you. Because obviously you have a belief system that says these things can pressure you. These things can force you into a lower vibration. What are you getting out of holding on to a belief that says that? You have to have some honest self-examination and exploration of your motivational mechanisms and the beliefs you have attached to them that make it seem as if these pressures are real, when in fact they're nothing but an illusion offered to you to see if you're willing to accept them as real upon yourself, which means you're bullying yourself and forcing yourself and pressuring yourself to accept things that aren't necessarily relevant for your true vibration. So you have to ask yourself the question, why are these things real to me? Why is this energy real to me? Is it just because it's part of my society? Why does that make it real? Is it because it's coming from a family member or a friend? Why should that make it real? Why should that make it relevant? Why should that make it have anything to do with who I know I prefer to be? These are the kinds of questions you need to explore within yourself and not just take it as a fact or a foregone conclusion that these pressures have any effect on you whatsoever. In much the same way that if a total stranger came up to you on the street and said something that another person had said to you that you are familiar with, you wouldn't necessarily think that they had any relevance, because you would say, well, they don't know who I am. They're just a crazy person saying things that have nothing to do with me, probably have everything to do with them and their issues, but it's not relevant for me. So you have to gain perspective and discernment on these kinds of experiences in your physical life as to what really is relevant for you and what you're willing to accept and what it is you feel you need to accept for some reason of your own. So examine your beliefs and examine the reasons why you would accept these concepts as real for you.